Welcome to the Google Analytics Custom Variables webinar. I'd like to take a second to go over today's agenda. First, we'll be joined by Phil Mui, Senior Product Manager for Google Analytics. He'll talk about the ins and outs of custom variables. Then, Nick Malowski, the Analytics Developer Evangelist, will share some best practices for using custom variables. Then we'll be joined by one of our GACs, that's Google Analytics Authorized Consultants, Empirical Path. Peter Halley and Jim Snyder will share with us a case study that they've done with BusinessInsider.com using custom variables. With that, I'd like to pass it over to Phil.
So the three most important concepts here, very simple, very basic, but I want to make sure we are at least using the same terminology. There is a visitor that came into your site through multiple sessions. Each session has multiple pages. Okay, hopefully that's clear. So what is a custom variable? So custom variable is relatively straightforward to explain. It is really a decoration on an existing page or event hit, such as in this particular session here, on page number 1 of a given session, I am decorating that page with two custom variables in Google Analytics. The first one, the name of the custom variable is type, the value is news. So custom variables in Google Analytics is actually a key value or name value pair, unlike some of the other vendors that you may have come across. The second custom variable I'm defining for page 1 is author equal to John. So clearly this is intended as a way for me to segment my traffic and pages for better analysis later. So let me continue. On page 2, I may say the page I'm looking at is sports, and the author who wrote that page is Jane. Okay. And then on that page, there may be a video on that page. And the user, in this case you, may come in. The total length of the video could be 216 seconds, and you may have watched 15 seconds. And the title of that movie could be Titanic, right, or that you care. And then after you watch the movie, you may go to another page. And that page is a product page because you would like to buy a DVD on Titanic. Okay? So this is the flow. And let's say you would like to, so we're talking about page level custom variables here. Now what if you said, hey, I wanted to also tag the entire session. And I want to decorate it with the custom variable login equal to true. So equivalently, this is the same as, if you think about it carefully, assigning custom variables at the page level with the same key value pair at every page and event. Okay? So, what is a custom variable? Now that we have looked through an animated example. It is really a key value decoration on a page or event hit. For those who are more advanced, this also applies to transaction and item hits. So, this is where this image comes in. A custom variable is a decoration on a page. So now you understand why this is such an important image. And really, that's really all it is. It is not about sending additional hits to Google. It is simply about decorating pages that people are already seeing as they go through your website. Okay, let's actually dive into the code. So here is the functional signature for how to send a custom variable to Google Analytics. It's a set custom var with 4 parameters. First one, let's talk about from the and forward, which is the scope variable that we talked about. There are 3 valid values here. 1 is the visitor scope, 2 is session scope, 3 is page scope. And then you can also set any arbitrary defined string for name and value as long as the name-value combination has no more than 64 characters. For most practical purposes, that is many characters for most words you would like to decorate a page with. Lastly, there is what we call index in the functional signature, but it's also called slot. At the moment, March 2010, valid values for index is 1 to 5, but that's a temporary number, and that number could increase in the future. So here's an example how to use it. So in our usual JavaScript snippet, embedded within the the snippet is this functional call. So walking through quickly, I am setting custom var to slot 1 with the name p section and with a value visitors, and with a scope set to page level custom variable. So this must be set before you call page tracker.track page view. Okay, so once you are done, and you would log into Google Analytics reporting front end, and you will see a report that looks like this. If you would like to look at custom variables by themselves, without the context of segments and stuff like that. So you can look at the names of your custom variables. When you drill down to any one of them, you also look at the values for those set of names. So each custom variable in Google Analytics can have multiple different values. So in that sense, you can send us as many custom variables as you can, up to roughly about 50,000. And you can also look at how these various custom variables and the sessions and the visitors that came in the context of the goals and e-commerce associated with those custom variables. And of course, the usual advanced filters and the table powers of analysis in the analytics front end, you can also reuse on this report.
Okay, so we had a quick question on the names and value character limits.
Sure.
So, can the name be 64 characters and the value 64 characters for a total of 128, or 64 total?
Yeah, so the 64 character limit applies to the combination of name-value pairs. So previously, for those who have been using analytics for a while, you previously had used another similar concept called setVar. Now let me just outright say setVar is not equivalent to setCustomVar in a number of respects. So here are a number of areas that they are different. First, setVar, the format of creating setVar are arbitrary strings, while setCustomVar are name-value pairs. The slot that's available previously for setVar is 1. Currently, as of March 28, 2010, is 5 for setCustomVar. The scope for setVar previously is the visitor section level, although there's some quirkiness here in case you have used this before. And for setCustomVar, you can set it at the page level, session level, or visitor level, depending on how you define it. And then in terms of size limit, setVar previously, the limit is really a browser limit. The lowest limit is for IE, which is 2048. So if you care about IE, that's for purposes, the limit for setVar. For setCustomVar, as we just discussed now, there is a 64 character limit per name value pair. And lastly, in terms of the differences, setVar is available for a given session. The value that you set is available only for hit number 1 of a given session. If you set setVar after hit number 1, it's only available in the next session that you come in. So this is a little bit of quirkiness of setVar. But for setCustomVar, it's very different. Of course, for page level, it's at a single hit scope. For both visitor and session level, it's 10 sessions. What that means is, if you have a 4-page session, and you set the setCustomVar as a very large page hit, that value for the session will apply to the entire session. I have an example later to clarify that further. So I wanted to address one of the questions that arose for the moderator page, which is reusing slots. So our general recommendation is that you should only reuse slots for page-level custom variables only. So here's an example. So I'm going to use this notation for the next few slides. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time explaining this. So I have 2 sessions, 2 visits. Visit 1 has 3 pages. And for each page, the comma separates each page in that session. And within each page, the bracket indicates the index or the slot for the custom variable that you're setting. So what I'm doing here on page 1, I'm setting type equal to news. for slot 1 of page 1 of the session. And then for category equal to city, I'm setting it for page 2 of slot 1. And then for page 3, I'm setting at slot 1 type equal to sports. So I'm reusing slot 1 for 3 custom variable key value pairs. And all 3 of them are page level. Similarly, I have the same user, let's say, to make it simple, come back at a separate session. And they also looked at 3 different pages. For these 3 pages, I set 3 page level custom variables on the same slot. Okay? So this is perfectly legal, and in fact it is highly encouraged. And as you can see by the definition that we have used, we now have 6 custom variables for slot 1. And so just to get some basic understanding out of the way, if I ask how many number of visits are there with type equal to news, well, there's 1. Number of visits with type equal to opinion, well, there is also 1, and so on. So hopefully this has no particular surprise here. So the first surprise that comes in, the first more difficult interpretation to come in, but very reasonable, is how many visits with type equal to auto? Think about it. Well, there is none. Right? It makes reasonable sense. Because we have a lot of type, but there is simply no type equal to auto. And then a slightly more complicated interpretation. Number of visits with page level custom variable name type. Well, both of the sessions here, both of the visits here, contain slots whose name is type. So the answer here is number of visits is 2. Okay? With that out of the way, let's look at a slightly more advanced example. Session level custom variable. So both converted equal to true, converted equal to false are session level custom variable. If I ask the question, how many number of visits are there for converted equal to false? The answer is 0. The reason is because of the pan-session nature of session level custom variables that I talked about earlier. For this given session, the intention of the person implementing this is that the person who came through page 1 wanted to buy something and then buy on page 2. So clearly for that session, the conversion is true. Right? So the number of visits, if this is only visits that exist, where converted equal to true has to be 1, while converted equal to false has to be 0. Okay, so now let's mix up the scope to bring it up to the ninja level of understanding of this. So now we have page level custom variable for slot 1, session level custom variable for slot 1 on page 2, and session level custom variable for slot 1 for page 3. The question is, how many sessions are there where converted equal to true? Well, the answer for that should be pretty obvious. And hopefully once you had it in your mind, it is 1. If you didn't get that, go back to look at the previous slide. Now, the harder question is, how many sessions are there where type equal to news? So I want all of you to think about this question. Take a pencil or pen, write down next to your computer. And if you think very carefully about the pan-session nature of session level custom variable, hopefully you would get the answer that the number of visits is 0 for type equal to news. Okay, let's pause a second. I know some of you is like, whoa, what is going on here? The answer is actually very simple. For slot or index 1, because it is pan-session, I have a pan-session session level variable. The very last session here overrode slot 1 for the previous 2 pages. So these 2, for all practical purposes, does not exist. They're still overridden by the session level custom variable converted equal to true. Okay, so now you said, okay, now I understand. Now let's go to the brown belt. So the brown belt of before becoming a ninja has the following example. I have 3 sessions. Session 1 is a visitor level custom variable where register equals to yes. For session 2, it's a session level custom variable, but on slot number 2 now, we're converted equal to false. And then for session number 3, I have type equal to news, page level custom variable, and for page 2, slot number 2, session level converted equal to true, or yes. So again, if you have a pen or pencil, jot this down. So the quiz is, how many sessions are there where register equals to yes? So write down your number. Second is, how many sessions are there where converted equals to yes? And then last question, how many sessions are there where type equals to news? Okay? Everybody ready? So the big surprise here, so let's explain from the bottom up. I think I have a boo-boo. So let me correct this. This should be no. So we are here very agile, as you can see. So here, number of visits where converted equal to false has to be 2. Oh, maybe a little bit more agile. There we go. So it has to be 2. The reason is, well, clearly, there are 2 sessions where converted equal to false. Okay? So hopefully the very bottom one is no problem. Now let's go up to the one on the top. Number of visits where register equal to yes. Why is this 3? Think about it. The reason it is 3 is because it is a visitor level custom variable for the same visitor. And even though I did not declare it for session number 2, because it is visitor level, it's actually for slot number 1, for page number 1 for session 2, it's also register equal to yes. So both of these have register equal to yes. For session number 3, I also have register equal to yes on page 2, even though I overrode it with type equal to yes. Okay? So therefore, register equal to yes is 3. So why is type equal to news 1? The reason is that for session number 3, I overrode the slot where type equal to yes, or type equal to news, over register equal to yes, so the number of visits is 1. Okay, so if you get that, come back to visitors and we'll send us questions. So finally, I wanted to do the black belt example. What happens? This is a slight variation from the previous page. I have 3 sessions. I'm using 2 different slots. Register equal to yes, convert equal to false, type equal to news. The number of visits where type equal to news is 1. Visits with register equal to yes is 2. It is 2 because visit 1 and visit 2 are both register equal to yes at slot 1. Finally, converted equal to false is 1 because that is the only session that exists. Okay, so that concludes the first session. And then for more information, bit.ly/GA custom variable for the official reference. And for those who are interested to look at migrating from SetVar, there's a very nice search engine line article linked up here. Lastly, on multi-touch attribution using custom variables, click on the bit.ly/multi-touch attribution. And here we have Nick Mielowski with our evangelist for the developer program here. So here he is.
Thanks, Bill. So now that we're all analysis ninjas with custom variables, and we really understand how custom variables work technically, what I wanted to do is broaden the perspective. And there's a lot of questions on our Google Moderator about how people would actually use custom variables in a business situation. So I've created a couple examples here that will take us through page level, session level, and visitor level custom variables. And we'll take a look at how you can integrate custom variables into your own business workflow. As Phil mentioned, custom variables are decorators to hits, sessions, and visitors. And this is the same thing as saying that they describe those levels. It's also saying that you can add metadata. So the interesting things that usually you want to add to a page or to an event or to a visitor typically resides in a different system. For example, for a page level, let's take a look at how we would track the author of a page. So here's a sample page where what we really want to know is who is the author who wrote this article. And the way this site works, typically, is there's a content management system. The author is stored in the database, and there's a page template that pulls from the database the proper author, the text of the article, the body, all the information that belongs on the page. So what we want to do is take the author and store it in a custom variable. So here's our content management system. To get the author into Google Analytics, we need the content management system to actually write the custom variable data to the page through the template, and then have analytics recognize that. So here's a little simple JavaScript code. And what happens is this content management system will write the author name, in this case it's Gary, and assign it to a piece of JavaScript. So this script is generated from your content management system. Then the sample tracking code on the page is the same JavaScript that we've seen before for GA tracking. And I'll walk through it. The first step, we get the page tracker. Then we check to see if the author exists. And then we go into the actual setting of the custom variable. The first line sets it at the index number 1. The second sets the custom variable name as author. The third line sets the actual value of the author. In this case, it's Gary. And this again came from the content management system through the page author variable we set. And finally, the last line is scope. And that is, in this case, a page level. And then we track the page view. So, how does this look in Google Analytics? Custom variables are integrated with our custom reporting. So here, we use the custom variable value 1, which we've defined as author in the previous example, and we look at pages and unique pages. We create this custom report, and here's the report that it would generate. And this is some not real data, but it's illustrative that we can see, Gary had the most page views of everybody on the site. And so here's a great way of how you can integrate information from content management systems through Google Analytics, and then using custom reporting, get a new view on data that you previously didn't have available. Let's look at another example here for the session level. So again, page is each page view, and then the session is all page views within the session. So in this example, what we want to do is track users who are logged in or not logged in. And we'll look at Picasa as an example. Up in the top right, you can see that I'm not logged in, and when I click sign in, I'll get authorized, I'll get redirected back to the page. And what we really are interested in understanding is how does the behavior of users differ between sessions and visits that are logged in versus not logged in. So let's see how we would do that. So when you're at Picasa, you log in through a simple Google account. You go up to the cloud of the Google authorization, we authorize you. And then in a standard setup, we would redirect you back to the page, which again is all run from a content management system, and you get sent to Picasa and you see the pages that you've requested. So what we'll add to this equation is the information that the user logged in and send that back to our template and have a content management template write that information to the page so that Google Analytics can track that. So let's look at the code example. Here's the template page after you logged in. And again, what we're going to want to do is have this new user login information being written to the page. Here's a simple piece of JavaScript that looks very similar to what we did in the previous example. And here's the tracking code that will capture it. And again, we'll walk through the code here. The code that gets generated from Picasa is the text of JavaScript. And it sets a variable that says user logged in. So when the browser renders it, we now have a variable called user logged in. And then in the actual tracking code, we first check to see if the user logged in has been set. And if it has been, we set the custom variable. In the first line, we use slot 3. We don't want to overwrite the slot with 1. We use slot 3 in this example. The name is called logged in. And it's a best practice if you have a space to actually use an underscore. And that makes it easier to interpret in the reports. The value is actually user logged in, and this is dynamically generated from Picasa server. And the scope in this case is 2. And this means session levels. So let's take a look at the reports. In this case, what we really want to understand is to be able to segment user behavior by these different pieces of metadata or declarations on the session. So what we use is our advanced segment report, which has been integrated. We have the custom variable name. In the report, it's called a key, and it's slot 3, so we look at key 3, and we have it set to logged in, which is the value we use. And then we use the variable value, which is true, and we call this the user's logged in segment. So now we have a group of sessions that have all been logged in. What we also want to do is compare that to a group of users who haven't logged in. And everything looks the same. The only thing we do is do the inverse of matching if it's true or not. And so this will give us all the other group of users who haven't logged in. And we call it users not logged in. Once you've set both of these up, in the advanced segment report, now you have two new custom segments that define this new user set. And when you look at the reports, you can then apply these segments to any of our GA reports, and you can see that we can now distinguish how site behavior differs between users who are logged in and who are not logged in. So you can see that the bounce rate is a little bit lower for users who are logged in and a little bit higher for users who are not logged in. So you can get a lot of insight by providing your data through your own system and sending them back to Google Analytics. Finally, let's go to a little bit more complex example at the visitor level. What we want to do on an e-commerce site is typically segment users by how valuable they are. And in this case, what we want to do is find out a segment of first-time buyers, buyers who have 2 to 5 transactions, buyers with 6 to 10 transactions, and 11 plus transactions. So these are visitors, and we want to understand in these groups how many times they've previously purchased and segment their behavior by them. Let's see how we would do that with new custom variables. So in the typical flow of a site, you have a landing page of your store. A person would come to a product page and buy the Google socks and click the Buy Now button. Finally, they'd be redirected to their e-commerce system and taken to the receipt page. And this is where the final transaction information will happen. And by the time they get to the receipt page, we know they've purchased. So let's look how we would capture the information in Google Analytics. When somebody clicks on the Buy Now button, they get sent to their e-commerce CRM system. And the transaction happens, the transaction data is sent over, and the user ID is typically, they have a billing address and credit card information. That's all sent to your e-commerce system. And what happens is the user is then redirected to the final receipt page, which GA has some tracking code. Now what you can do in your system, using custom variables, is run a query to say, for this specific user who's created a transaction, how many previous transactions have they had? You can then send that data back to the template and then use the template to write that information back to the site. Let's see how we would capture that information in Google Analytics. So here's the receipt page template. What you would want to do is say, for a person who has only one, this is the first transaction they've ever done, you'd want to set them as 1. You'd want to bucket the people who've done 2 to 5 transactions in their own bucket and so forth. And you'd have the content management system specify for the number of transactions how many times they've done that. Then in the tracking code, similar to what we've done before, we see if that value has been set. And in this case, through setting the custom variable, the first line will set it at slot number 5. We'll select the name as transactions. We'll set the value as the number of transactions defined by what the server has generated. And we'll set that as scope 1, which is visitor level. So now, once we've collected this data, we can go back into the advanced segment builder. In this case, we'll create a new segment where the value for slot number 5 matches exactly to 2 to 5, which is the string that we pass to analytics. And we call this segment visitors 2 to 5. What we can then do is in advanced segment report, see the visitors who've transacted 2 to 5 times before in the past. And then we can apply this to any report. And here are all the total keywords for visitors who've purchased 2 to 5 times previously. And this is the total number of visits and site usage of the keywords for that segment. So in this example, it's pretty simple, but you can really see how you can send data from your e-commerce and CRM systems into Google Analytics using custom variables. And we think that's really powerful. The one thing to keep in mind is you should not store personally identifiable information in Google Analytics. If it's in your system and you aggregate it and you send it as a bucket, that's okay. But in this case, that's what we did, and that's fine. There's one really interesting part of visitor level custom variables, and that's the fact that we actually store that information in a cookie, and through a JavaScript code, you can actually extract that information that value has been set. Okay, so what does that mean? So let's say you have a home page, and let's say you have a person who's been back 2 to 5 times before, and you want to send them a targeted promotion. For example, you've purchased before, you're very valuable, we'll give you 50% off to buy again. You can do that with custom variables. Let's take a look at exactly the code to do that. On the page, you simply use the same JavaScript snippet as before, and we get a value page tracker. We then use this new method called getVisitorCustomVar, and the parameter is a number that is the index of the value you've set for your visitor custom bar. In the previous example, we set it at number 5. So what this number will return is any time that the visitor custom variable value has been set. And here we check if it's been set. We set it to see if the value is from 2 to 5. In this case, this is our valuable segment we found. And then we can show the promotion. So here's a great way that you can use Google Analytics to start targeting users based on previous actions. So with that, we conclude our examples. Some of these are a little bit more complex, and so what we wanted to also mention is that we have a full number of Google Analytics authorized consultants that can help you get this set up. If you want to do this, you should definitely contact them. We actually have one of our most advanced users of custom variables on the call, Empirical Path, and they're going to actually take you through a real case study of how they were making a client successful.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you all for attending this webinar. You've learned a lot about the innovation and customizability of the custom variable, and now Empirical Path will walk you through an example of how we implemented it with a client of ours in the media space. Very quickly, who is Empirical Path? We're a web analytics and market research firm that's been in business since 2002. We focus very much on interpretation and business recommendations from the visitor behavior that tools like Google Analytics enable you to see. So while we do implementation and customization, the end goal is always to remain a partner to our clients and provide the kind of actionable recommendations that these systems promise. We're presenting an example from the media space, and it's no coincidence. My partner Jim Snyder is going to co-present, and I both have backgrounds in media, and also we have a practice area that's pretty deep in the not-for-profit and government space. Jim is actually sitting in Atlanta. I'm actually sitting in Albuquerque. Those are our two offices, but we have clients all over the country. And we're very proud and thankful to the team at Google Analytics that we are the newest GAC, the newest Google Analytics authorized consultant. We've been in the program before through a prior company, but it's great to be back and have access to the resources and the other experts there. So enough about us. Let's get into our client. They've agreed to participate in this webinar, although all the data we're going to show you is disclosed. And they are Business Insider. Their best-known property for this audience, largely comprised of web professionals, is probably Silicon Alley Insider, which is a very popular website covering really all things digital media. Altogether, Business Insider has an audience, and this is from their media kit, of over 3.2 million unique visitors per month. So they've been very successful with their model. And they've expanded from Silicon Alley Insider to 8 distinct publications that they call verticals that are all under that master brand of Business Insider. So you can see here on the banner that sits atop all of their pages, that main navigation are the verticals. That's great that they're all under one brand, and it gives them a real diverse set of content. But the challenge is that they really keep all of these titles under that main businessinsider.com domain name. And in order to be SEO friendly, to allow search engines to find the articles and know what they're about, they don't use any subdirectories to distinguish between an article that's in Silicon Alley Insider as opposed to an article that maybe is in their War Room publication. So you can see these URLs, provide a lot of information to Google, for example. But when you are inside the analytics, it's not always easy to tell, or frankly, it's impossible to tell where these stories sit in terms of the verticals. Another important part of the context is that the site tends to get a ton of traffic from search engines, a ton of traffic from referrals as well, both social bookmarking sites as well as other publications whose editors find the stories useful. And as a result, all the 3 different templates that they publish in, both traditional home pages, as well as a single article post, as well as their slideshows, very popular way of showing lots of content, they're all very popular as landing pages. So they could each be kind of the very first experience that a new visitor has to the brand. And that'll become important when we talk about both traffic sources as well as landing page efficacy. So as a result of all this, there's a few needs. When you look at any of the Google Analytics content reports, that includes the top landing pages report that marketers care about too. It's really impossible to distinguish between articles that are from, say, Clusterstock and articles that are from The Money Game and articles that are from Silicon Alley Insider. Whether you're looking at page title or whether you're looking at URL, there's really no distinction amongst these verticals. Yes, the CMS knows, but from the point of view of the analyst, it's impossible to tell, which of these publications is doing the best. That same kind of blindness affects their their analysis of their marketing efforts. They need to better understand, what landing page is involved in a marketing effort, and how do we kind of work backward through the chain of user acquisition to understand, what mediums, what sources, what keywords are working to drive people to our properties. This pie chart and the disguised data you see here is really for the whole site, and ideally they'd be able to access this for each of their verticals, but not without some help. And that's where I turn it over to Jim and we talk about the help that we provided in the form of multiple custom variables. Jim, you want to take it?
So thanks, Peter. So taking a deeper dive, what you see here is the actual code that was implemented to achieve the custom variables. So this is an example of a browser source on a Silicon Alley Insider page. So using the page variables already in use, sort of elsewhere in the application, we used the page level custom variables that Nick and Phil talked about, and so in this example you can see that we assigned vertical to key position 1, and then the value Alley Insider to the value slot, and then likewise, the page type key value pair passing slideshow to the Google Analytics custom variables. So on the next slide here, we see on the reporting side, once the pages are filled with custom variables, then everything is beautiful, and they're all passed to Google Analytics, and various reporting is available. Here we see some examples. The data is exposed directly in visitor section under custom variables, and you can see that key value pairs, as we saw in the code, to custom reports. And then finally, these values are all available in advanced segments. So you can actually see, for example, that Alley Insider is selected. Might be a little hard to see, but now there are tons of ways that you can sort of get at this data and segment and reporting, as we'll show you. So on the next slide, let's look at sort of the way, the after of when the code was installed in the content on all content pages. This is another sample custom report that each of the verticals are exposed. So this report was created using custom reporting, using page views, bounce rate, as metrics, and the dimension of the custom variable value 1, which is the vertical, which you can see there, is so this report allows us to see where visits actually started in each of these verticals, showing where visitors are actually landing. Of course, just to remind you, this is disguised data. So moving on to the next slide, drilling down into one of the verticals in the custom report, we can call all of our sources, which are rolled up nicely under one vertical. These reports are really good examples of how a manager might get a nice breakdown of, say, key traffic mediums that make up a vertical, and then and then you'll remember that before we were sort of limited to a page level, and we're really not able to sort of amalgamate everything on a section level. So moving on to taking a deeper dive, we look at the custom report by page type, or dragging the value 2 onto a custom report. And you'll see here that the different page types, you'll remember these are sort of like the slideshow posts, page fronts that Peter talked about, and that we can see that a really big difference in customer retention as large bounce rates with different page types. Okay, and finally, here's another custom report cross-referencing where we combine the vertical with page type. In this case, we see when landing page entrances and stickiness with bounce, and then by page views, this gives us exactly what we wanted, a breakdown by vertical and page type. This could also be for the slideshow and article post, and we can see sort of how each section stacks up against one another. So now I'll turn it over to Peter to talk about some of the lessons learned.
Thanks, Jim. We showed some of the some of the reports that these custom variables enabled, and as a result, our narrative and interpretation for Business Insider that we do every week and every month was a lot richer. We were able to provide insights that would help specific managers within the company that only had responsibility for a given vertical. For example, an editor to a publication like ClusterStock can now see, which of their articles are the most popular and which have the greatest engagement levels without having to sort of manually filter them out from other titles. Likewise, as they embark on changes to their template, they can target that effort. And for example, with the finding about bounce rate, they have the ability to go in and work on that post template to make sure that it's as sticky as possible. So you'll actually see some new layouts very soon if you look at the Business Insider site. We learned a lot of lessons as well about the best way to make use of these custom variables. And the first is it's kind of a business lesson, which is that there's some effort involved in doing this, although Google's made it pretty easy. But just to get it on the map, we built the business case by saying, look, there's certain questions that you ask us, things that we know would be useful to you that we just can't answer with the current implementation. So we're able to kind of frame the very slight cost of doing this in terms of a benefit of you'll finally know these things. The other thing that kind of made that cost very minimal was that we took advantage of nomenclature and variables that were already being published to their page. Just as Phil and Nick pointed out, things that the CMS is already reporting, variables that they're already passing can be used, and we didn't have to tweak the CMS to report those out. The other lesson we learned, and this is sort of universal, is we crawled before we walked, and certainly walked before we ran. We started with page-level custom variables, and we're going to do some session-level and visitor-level variables down the road with the same client with other clients. But page-level, in some sense, was the easiest to explain and understand. It doesn't involve some of those complicated slot rules that Phil and Nick explained. And so it was a good way to kind of get our feet wet and understand the power of the custom variable. The other lesson is we learned that of the 3 different ways to access the data, that the custom report provided us with the most flexibility. When you drill down through the visitor menu and hit that custom variables submenu item, it still takes some further drilling to get down to what you're really after. When you create a custom report and put it right on the dashboard so that people can find it easily, you can really get those insights right there on the first screen, and that was a huge benefit. And you can do things like cross multiple custom variables, as we showed on that last report, which is a lot harder to do outside of custom reports. Next thing we learned, and this was from our clients digging around in Google Analytics and seeing it for themselves, is that you do have to be careful about metrics like visits. When one visit includes multiple verticals or multiple page types on Business Insider, each of those rows and those resulting custom reports is going to report the visit as their own. And so if you add up those rows, it's a much larger number than the actual total. So it's important to set expectations there. We also use metrics like bounce and entrance that don't create those duplications. PageView, is also kind of a pure metric in this case, and that helps to avoid confusion with the results. And finally, we talked about the fact that effectively there's a ClusterStock profile available to somebody who only cares about that title, or a Silicon Valley Insider profile, but they're not true profiles, so you don't have the ability to assign rights and privileges to people to see only their profile. So that's something we're hoping Google Analytics will roll out down the road, is the ability to filter on the custom variable so we can create a profile that limits people to really just seeing their data. Thank you again for joining us, and thanks to Google Analytics for hosting us. If you'd like to learn more about Empirical Path's capabilities in Google Analytics and with custom variables in particular, again, we are promoting a special offer for people who attended this webinar live. Through March 31st, we'll have an offer up on empiricalpath.com/webinar for people who saw it live. After March 31st, we'll have a different offer for folks who see the archive version. But either way, we're very happy to help clients, whether in the media space or e-commerce, B2B, corporate sites, all the different applications of Google Analytics. Custom variables can apply to each of them. So thank you again.
I'd like to thank you all for coming to today's webinar. There's a few links that Phil and Nick mentioned in their talks. I just want to bring these up for reference. First, we have the official reference. This is the official guide to using custom variables, explains the code and how to set the different variables. Also, we have a guide for migrating from the set var over to custom variables. And lastly, we have the example on multi-touch attribution. Nice advanced example. Again, I'd like to thank you all for coming and happy analyzing.